Good morning and welcome. Pleased to welcome everybody to today's release for the Nation's Report Card, the 2015 Mathematics and Reading Results. I want to thank you all for coming, and thanks for you who are tuning into our webcast today. I'm Terry Mazzani, Chairman of the National Assessment Governing Board and moderator for today's event. The Governing Board is a nonpartisan organization created by Congress to set policy for the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, also known as the Nation's Report Card. The results we'll reveal today detail 4th and 8th graders' assessment performance nationwide in every state and in 21 urban school districts participating in NAEP's Trial Urban District Assessment, or TUDA. This includes the District of Columbia Public Schools, and our host today, Tyler Elementary School, is part of that district. Before I go farther, I'd like to thank Tyler Elementary School principal, faculty, and staff for hosting us, and a special thank you goes to Mrs. Swift's art students for painting the wonderful banner that we have on our left over here. Let's give them a round of applause. It's one thing when you have an event at a school, you can always count on beauty and goodness to surround you here. I also want to acknowledge several governing board members in our audience today who have joined us. I will ask them to stand when I call their name. First, we have our Vice Chair, Lucille Davey. And we have 2 brand new board members, Alberto Carvalho, Superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and Joe Wilhoff, a consultant who recently worked with the Washington Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction for that, and Linda Rosen, who's CEO of Change the Equation. So in addition, a long-standing board member, Tanya Miles, who's with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for that. These are among the 20-some-odd board members who work tirelessly on the public's behalf, serving the mission of the National Assessment Governing Board. Today we have a panel of experts to discuss the report card data today. We'll be beginning with Peggy Carr, who's Acting Commissioner for the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES. She will present the NAEP results for the nation and states. I'll then offer a few remarks on those findings, and then we'll hear from Chris Minich, the Executive Director of the Council of Chief State School Officers, and Hansel Kang, the District of Columbia State Superintendent of Education. After, there will be a Q&A session and a short video screening for that, and then Peggy will present district-level data, and 2 panelists will offer their reactions to that. Those panelists will be Michael Casserly, the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools, and Kaya Henderson, the Chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools. We want to make sure that this is a discussion with both our in-person and our remote audiences as well. For those of you who are on the webcast, please feel free to submit a question for the panelists at any time during the event. Just type your question into the chat tab on the right-hand side of your screen and click send. In-person attendees will have an opportunity as well to ask questions during our 2 question and answer sessions. If you need technical assistance with your webcast, go to the Help tab at the right of your screen. We also encourage you to join in the ongoing conversation in Twitter using the hashtag NAEP, N-A-E-P. Now I would like to introduce Kaya Henderson, who will kick off the conversation and later comment on the district-level results. Kaya?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great day in DC Public Schools, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to Tyler Elementary School, which is an amazing little place that serves an incredible range of young people and is really emblematic of the progress that we are making here at DC Public Schools. We're pleased and proud to host the 2015 NAEP and TUTA results. The last time the Department of Education released these results in 2013, United States Secretary of Education Arne Duncan highlighted DC Public Schools as the fastest improving urban school district in the country. Our teachers and leaders at DCPS have been at the forefront of the big changes that we've made. We've adopted higher standards. We've aligned our curriculum to the Common Core. We created a new Cornerstones initiative to ensure that all students have access to high-quality learning experiences, and we've done more. All of this to say, we at DC Public Schools are constantly pushing to improve. As you read in your newspapers this morning, and you'll hear about today, DCPS is still the fastest improving urban school district in America. I can say that because I'm the host and I have the microphone. So, with that good news from my district, let's hear how the rest of the country is doing. Please welcome Peggy Carr, Acting Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics at the United States Department of Education.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm here today to release the results of the 2015 mathematics and reading assessments from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the nation's report card. These assessments were given earlier this year to 4th and 8th grade students across the country. Today, I'll describe detailed results for the nation and the states. I'll also highlight the main findings from our trial urban district assessment. You've heard the abbreviation TUTA. And I'll do that in the second part of the presentation today. The assessments were administered in early 2015. And as you can see, we had large samples for the two assessments, with 279,000 students for 4th grade and 273,000 for 8th grade. The results for the nation include public and private schools. At the state level, we have private school results only in all 50 states, along with the District of Columbia and the Department of Defense schools, and they are treated today for comparison purposes as states. In addition, we conduct the assessment in the 21 districts that you've heard about thus far across the country, and again, that's part of our TUTA program. We report student performance both in terms of scale scores and as percentages of students obtaining various achievement levels. NAEP scale scores indicate what students know and can do. For mathematics and reading, scores for students in grades 4 and 8 are reported on a 500-point scale. These scales are developed separately for each subject. Achievement levels were developed by the National Assessment Governing Board. They set standards for what students should know and be able to do. For each subject and for each grade, the governing board has established standards for basic, proficient, and advanced performance. Students who reach the proficient level display solid academic performance, demonstrating competency over challenging subject matter. The assessments include both multiple choice questions and questions requiring either short or long written out answers, which we call constructed response questions. I'll first highlight the overall national results in mathematics and reading before turning to more detailed results for each subject for both the nation and states. And again, the TUTA results will be discussed during the second half of the release today. Before beginning or describing in details, I want to point out a few main findings from the 2015 assessment. In mathematics, there were decreases nationally in scores at both grades 4 and 8 since the last assessment. Average scores were lower for students at the low end and the high end of the performance range, as well as for several subgroups or student groups. At the state level, results were a bit mixed. At grade 4, average scores were higher in 2015 than in 2013 in 3 states and/or jurisdictions. In 30 states, however, the average score in mathematics was lower in at least one of the grades. At grade 8, national average scores were lower in 2013 in both reading and in mathematics. This is generally true across the performance levels. The average reading score was higher in 1 state. Scores were lower, however, in 26 states in either mathematics or reading or in both subjects. Over the longer term, scores were higher in 2015 compared to the initial assessment administered in the 1990s. And the percentages of students at or above proficient showed a similar pattern. Now I'll describe the national results for mathematics in greater detail. The NAEP Mathematics Assessment measures students' performance over 5 content areas. They include number properties and operations, measurement, geometry, data analysis, statistics and probability, and algebra. While that information is available on the report today, I will only describe the results in terms of overall average score. This chart shows the average mathematics scores for each assessment since the first assessment in 1990. These score differences, like all comparisons of NAEP data, are tested to ensure that they are statistically significant. We only discuss differences that meet the test of statistical significance. The asterisks by the score number indicates the scores are statistically different from 2015. At grade 4, the average score was 240, which was about 2 points lower than the 2013 score of 242. Going back to 1990, the average score in 2015 was 27 points higher. To observe how students have performed across the performance range, we look at performance by percentiles. Lower performing students make up the 10th and 25th percentile. Average performing students make up the 50th percentile, and higher performing students make up the 75th and the 90th percentile. At grade 4, at all percentiles except the 90th, the scores were lower than their peers in 2013. At grade 8, the average score of 282 was about 3 points lower than in 2013. Again, the asterisk here indicates a statistically significant difference from 2015. So, for example, the 2015 score was not statistically different from the 2009 as it lacks an asterisk. Over the long term, the 2015 score was 19 points higher than the 1990 number. Now looking at the performance of students at the various percentile levels, students at all levels scored lower in 2015 than their peers in 2013. Now, let's take a look at mathematics results in terms of percentage of students who performed at the NAEP achievement levels, basic, proficient, and advanced. These graphs compare percentages of students at each of the NAEP mathematics achievement levels in 2015 with the corresponding percentages in 2013 and 1990. Grade 4 is on the top and grade 8 is on the bottom. Each bar shows the percentages of students below basic, at proficient, and at advanced for a given assessment year. Also shown on the right is the percentage of students at or above proficient each year. That is, at either the percent proficient or advanced level. At both grades, the percentage of students at or above proficient was lower in 2015 than in 2013, but higher in 1990. Looking at the bar charts, we see lower percentages below basic and higher percentages at proficient and advanced when compared to 2015 to the earlier assessment year of 1990. However, within the achievement levels, we notice the percentages of students at below basic and the categories, and this is on the far left, rose from 2013 to 2015, and the percentage at proficient and at advanced decreased, mirroring the decreases that we have discussed already nationally. It is also important to note the tremendous improvement made since the first assessment. There were 50% and 48% of students at this level in grade 4 and 8 respectively, and they were below basic. In 2015, we had 18% in 4th grade and 29% in 8th grade. Now, this is a significant decrease, but clearly significant progress since 1990. This table shows mathematics scores and changes for the race ethnicity groups and for males and females. Data for grade 4 are on the left, and for grade 8, we see those data on the right. The percentages of students in each group in 2015 at grade 4 are shown in parentheses. Now, grade 8 percentages are not shown, but they are very similar. Also shown are the average scores for each group in their respective grades. We now see the point change, if any, from 2013. The diamonds indicate no statistically significant differences between the 2 years. In grade 4, we observed that both white and female students showed a significant decrease compared to 2013. In grade 8, we see white, Black, Hispanics, males, and females showed a decline or decrease compared to 2013. Finally, we show the changes from 1990 to 2015. All groups have improved since 1990. Please note that the dashes here indicate that the data were not available for these groups in 1990. While not here, the report card has information on changes and score gaps for these students and for these groups. For example, the white-black score gap at grade 4 narrowed from 26 points in 2013 to 24 points in 2015 because of the significant decrease in white student performance. There were no other changes in the white-black or the white-Hispanic gaps for these 2 years. This table shows similar data for students by various types of locations, students with and without disabilities, and English language learners. Note that average scores for several groups decreased compared to the 2013 level, with the exception of students in cities, English language learners in grade 8, and students in cities and suburbs, and students with disabilities, and English language learners in grade 4. None of these groups were reported separately in 1990, so we cannot report changes for the earliest assessment for these students. Now let's take a look at mathematics results for the states and jurisdictions. As I noted in my introduction, the state's results did not always follow the national pattern. Average scores among public school students in the states at grade 4 ranged from 231 to 251, compared to the national average for public school students of 240. This map shows the states that had increases or decreases in scale scores for grade 4 from 2013 to 2015. Now, some of the smaller states are presented here in circles on the right to make it easier for you to see visibly today. States and jurisdictions where scores increased are shown in dark blue. These were the Department of Defense schools, the District of Columbia, and Mississippi. 16 states shown here in light blue had decreases in average scores. There were no significant changes in scores from 2013 to 2015 in 33 states. They're shown here in gray. At grade 8, state scores range from 263 to 297 compared to the national average of 281. Between 2013 and 2015, average scores decreased in 22 states, shown here in blue, while in 30 states and jurisdictions, the scores were not statistically significant. There were no increases. So now we're going to turn to the results for reading. The NAEP assessment framework treats reading as a dynamic, cognitive process that involves understanding written text, developing and interpreting meaning, and using meaning as appropriate to the type of text and purpose and situation. The assessment used both literary and informational texts. Literary text included fiction, literary nonfiction, and poetry. Informational texts included exposition, argumentation, persuasive text, and procedural text and documents. So let's turn to the graph. This graph shows a trend over time for the nation for fourth graders. The average score was no different in comparison to 2013, but higher than all the previous assessments. The average score in 2015 was 6 points higher than in the initial assessment in 1992. Next, we see the average scores for students at the various performance levels. Scores did not differ from those in 2013 for any of the levels shown here. For example, high-performing students, those at the 90th percentile, had an average score of 266, which is not statistically different from 2013. Similarly, students performing at the 10th percentile had a score of 174, and that was the same as reported in 2013. At grade 8, the 2015 score was 265, and that was about 2 points lower than we reported in 2013, but the same as in 2011 and higher than all of the previous years. While the trend line is fairly flat, the 2015 score at grade 8 was 5 points higher than in 1992. When examining changes at the performance levels shown here, the pattern at grade 8 was different than what we just reported for grade 4. 8th grade scores decreased at every level performance shown, reflecting the decrease at the national level that I just discussed. At grade 4, the percentages of students at all achievement levels in 2015 were wholly different from those that we reported in 2013. The percentage at and above percent proficient was also not different from the 2013. Compared to 1992, the percentages at or above proficient and at advanced were higher in 2015, and the percentages below basic was lower. There was a decrease at grade 8. The percentages of students at or above proficient went from 36 to 34% between 2013 and 2015. The percentage at or above proficient was higher in 2015 than in 1992, and the percentage below basic was lower. We also see a decrease for percent proficient and an increase at the below basic in comparison to 2013. This table shows the performance of students by race, ethnicity, and gender in reading. At grade 4, there were no changes in performance compared to 2013 by race, ethnicity, or gender as indicated by the diamonds here, if you're able to see them. At grade 8, however, scores for white, black, and Hispanic students decreased, as well as those for both males and females. Compared to 1992, scores increased at both grades for all groups for which separate results were reportable in 1992. Data in the report card show that the national black, white, and Hispanic white gaps in reading at both grades did not change from 2013 to 2015. Results for students at various types of location follow a similar pattern as shown here. No change at grade 4 from 2013, but decreases for all except students in city schools and ELL students at grade 8. No change in the city variable is something that I will return to in the second part of my talk, my release today. Students with and without disability did improve at grade 4, but decreased at grade 8, following the general pattern I've already described today. We don't have data from 1992 for these student groups. As with mathematics, results across the states and jurisdictions, they did vary. At grade 4, state scores range from 207 to 235 compared to the national school average of 221. There were score increases in 13 states and jurisdictions and decreases in 2 states compared to 2013. There were no changes in 37 states and jurisdictions. At grade 8, scores range from 248 to 277 compared to the national average of 264. And there was one state, West Virginia. They improved over 2013, and 8 states showed a decline. There were no changes in 43 states and jurisdictions. So that concludes my talk today on the results. At this point, I'll pause and I'll turn the podium back over to those who are going to moderate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peggy, and to your entire staff who does an incredible job to ensure the accuracy and integrity of reporting on these data. You know, they are a surprise when you look at the trends, but to recognize that one year doesn't make a new trend, and it's the purpose of having this long-term trend that allows us as a country to place this into context of those longer-term trends. The fact that as a country we have made progress over time, and a recognition that in any type of long-term trend, it's not unlikely that there will be some ups and downs in the course of that. I think everybody here is also pretty aware of the amount of change that is underway in public education, from defining new governance practices to new curriculum and standards to teaching practices to new forms of education delivered online. And in the midst of all of this change, it will ultimately be a matter of, for state level officials, district level officials, teachers in their classrooms, parents, to examine the implication and what is different in their situation that is or is not relevant to this report on the national trends. But this is the responsibility of the National Assessment Governing Board, together with the National Center for Education Statistics, as chartered by Congress, to provide this periodic yardstick for measuring progress of students in our country, and that is the charge that we have delivered on here today. Know that this will provide very useful data for researchers, academics, and policymakers for months to come as people try to get inside these numbers and understand what is different, what is the meaning of this, and attempt to draw some sort of conclusions for that. To begin some of those conversations, it's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Chris Minnick, who is the Executive Director of the Council of Chief State School Officers, also known as CCSSO. Chris was appointed as Executive Director of CCSSO in December of 2012, so you're coming up on an anniversary date here. And he has served the council since 2008. As Executive Director, he has ushered in a new strategic plan for making sure all students graduate from high school prepared for college, careers, and life in general. He has an extensive background in assessment and accountability work, having held multiple positions at Harcourt focused on assessment improvement. He is formerly Director of Test Design and Implementation in the Oregon Department of Education, where he led the statewide implementation of Oregon's online assessment. Please welcome Chris Minnick.
Good morning. I want to thank Kaya and Hansel for inviting us here to DC Public Schools to have this announcement today. I think the first thing I want to just say about these results is that it confirms for me what we knew, is that we have a long way to go with our kids across the country, that we have set this new goal for the country of college and career readiness for all kids. Clearly, these results today show we're not quite there yet, and we have some work to do. We did see some bright spots. DC is a shining star in these results, and so I'm excited to hear from Hansel and Kaya about those results here in a bit. We also had an uptick in Mississippi, West Virginia, and as you saw, 13 other states in reading, fourth grade. So, it's kind of a mixed bag. We're at a time of transition across this country where DC was one of the places that started the earliest with these new standards, and they're seeing those results. I think in other places, we're still trying to help teachers adjust to these higher standards. This is something that we would expect to see as we transition to higher standards, is sort of a flattening of scores or a slight downturn. I'm excited to see teachers get more comfortable with what's going on in these higher standards, and I think we will begin to see the improvement over time that we're looking for. I think the other thing I would point to is just to make sure that as we are giving these assessments, as we have shifted sort of how we're teaching certain things across the country, I think it's important to also look at what we're testing. So making sure that what is in these assessments is aligned to what's going on across the country in terms of instruction is something that I look forward to working with NAGB and our state superintendents on as we move forward. I think it's important to point out that NAEP's one measure. We also see some very positive signs across the country. Last week we released the graduation rates, the U.S. Department of Education released the graduation rates, and we saw states up across the board in terms of how we're graduating our students. So while this is an important data point for us to look at, NAEP has always been a very important thing for state superintendents, and it will continue to be. There are other data points that should be part of this conversation, whether it be our new state assessments that we've transitioned to this year, graduation rates, statewide accountability systems. These are all things that should be taken together to show a context of what's going on across the country. The final point I want to make, and I do want to get to some questions and bring Hansel up here to talk a little bit about what's going on in DC, is that 1 year does not make a trend. Terry said this as well. What's most exciting about what's going on in DC, as Kaya said, it's been twice. And we're starting to see real growth in certain areas. I hope that as we look at the scores in 2017, we begin to see that upward trend. And in mathematics, you look at the 1990 scores, where we started in fourth grade around 213. We've made great progress across the country in mathematics. I think it's important for us to double down and make sure we're preparing teachers across the country to teach mathematics and get all kids to these standards, not just some kids. So with that, I'd like to introduce Hansel Kang, the state superintendent of DC, and she will come up and give us some remarks about the local context here in DC. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm proud and honored to be here today to share some more detail about the District of Columbia's sustained and significant improvement on the NAEP results. Because DC's 64 local education agencies collectively participate in NAEP's state program, and our largest LEA, DCPS, also participates in the Trial Urban District Assessment, today is particularly exciting because we get to see the progress of our students in multiple ways. I'm excited to be here today with my colleague and a great education leader, Chancellor Kaya Henderson, who has a great deal to celebrate in DCPS's results. So I'll let her speak to that later in the program. And for now, just want to share a few highlights from DC's state level results, which include students from both DCPS and DC's public charter schools. DC students continue to make exciting progress on the 2015 NAEP assessment in fourth grade reading and math, while sustaining the progress of prior years in the eighth grade tests. DC students achieved particularly striking gains in fourth grade reading, where we had the biggest gains of any state in 2015. But what is most striking in the sustained progress that DC has continued to make over time. In 2003, DC's students were far below their national peers, scoring 28 and 29 scale score points below the national average, respectively, in reading and math. 12 years later, they are closing in on the national average and have narrowed that gap to just 9 points in each subject. In 2003, DC's African American students also scored significantly below their peers nationwide. They have now all but eliminated that gap in fourth grade reading and math, closing within 1 and 2 points of their peers across the country. Yesterday, we shared news about the current readiness of our high school students in DC for college and careers. Today's results validate the incredible strides that DC has made over time in improving outcomes for students, and they give us even greater confidence that we will be able to meet the new bar that we have set for ourselves with the PARCC assessment. I'm inspired by the hard work of our students and our educators in DC, and so proud to see their efforts reflected again in this year's NAEP results. I look forward to working with Mayor Bowser, Chancellor Henderson, the Public Charter School Board, the DC Council, and the State Board of Education to continue to sustain, accelerate, and deepen the progress being made in public schools in the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you, Hansel and Chris. We're now open for questions, our question and answer session. I invite not only those of you in the audience here, but those of you who are joining online to please use the chat tab to the right of your screen to submit questions here. We have a microphone right in the middle aisle. I invite anybody here in the auditorium to come up and ask questions. And I'll use good teacher wait time until somebody shows up. Okay. We do have a number of, oh, here we go. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Davis, president of the Washington Teachers Union, and I'm quite excited about this and, of course, having you here. One of the issues that continues to crop up from our teachers and, of course, the progress that we've made on the NAEP in reading and math for certain students, we're quite excited about that. However, the achievement gap between poor students and more fluent students is something that is quite disturbing. And the question I have to raise is, what advice, what recommendations would you have for us to take a closer examination of the widening gap between our poor students and our most affluent?
Thank you for that excellent question. Peggy, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Well, we looked at gaps this year, and ironically, you're absolutely right. Some of the largest gaps in the country are in this district. But on the other side, no other jurisdiction saw a decrease or narrowing of the gaps. And so while it's not where I think you would want to be, but to show progress in both performance and narrowing of the gap is something to be noted.
Yeah, I would just add, I think across the country, the gap is stubborn. There's no place that you could point to where sort of they've solved this issue. So some of the things that I've seen that seem to be working are thinking about resourcing differently. So not just throwing money at the problem, but making sure resources are getting to the kids that need it the most, I think is a big thing. I also think that there's no one solution for certain communities. So inner city DC needs a different conversation than rural Montana, which I was in last week. And rural Montana has some of the same gap problems that inner city DC does. And so, but the solution would be very different. So I think local communities have to have a conversation about how do we get resources into the right places? How do we make sure that in a time where the local resources aren't always abundant, what are we going to do to spend the resources on the kids that need it the most? And that's the conversation I hope takes place across the country.
Okay. We have another question here.
Hi, my name's Michael Chandler. I'm with the Washington Post. I'm interested in the economically disadvantaged students and how going forward in the future, if there's any, because of the changes in community eligibility, are you concerned about the validity of those scores now or in the future? And statistically, how are you looking at that issue?
So again, a good question. We were watchful this time around with the changes in the program's procedures, what would happen to the numbers. But in actuality, they did not change that much. We went from about 50 to 52% eligible for free and reduced price lunch. And quite honestly, I expected much more of a variation, much more of a change than what we saw. So to answer part of your question, I think it's okay to sort of put the same level of confidence in the results we have today in comparison to 2013. Now, moving forward, I suspect that what is happening in the country just hasn't caught up with our data collection data yet. So we're going to have to start looking at other proxies for SES. We've actually been working on some special studies, some empirical studies that will get us closer to a better aggregate measure of SES moving forward, so it won't catch us off guard.
Thanks.
Very good. Okay, one more here, and then we'll take a question from our web audience.
Hi, this is Arthur McKee from City Bridge Foundation. I'd just actually like to ask that same question to the State Superintendent of DC, because actually the rate of SEO, of automatic eligibility, is much higher in DC than it is in other parts of the country. Do you have any comments similar to the chair?
Sure. So we continue to use the economically disadvantaged measure and look at the results on NAEP. But we also in DC have the new at-risk indicator, which includes students who are direct certified through SNAP or TANF, as well as homeless students and students who are overage and under credit in high school. And so we are continuing to look at our data by the traditional economically disadvantaged definition, as well as the at-risk indicator. And to the earlier question, I think at-risk is one area where, to Chris's point, I think DC has done a tremendous job of ensuring resources reach our students most in need with the additional at-risk funding that the administration and the council have prioritized for our schools.
Okay, thank you. Valerie, do we have a question from our web audience?
We do. Thank you, Terry. This question is from Beth LaDuca with Oregon Department of Ed. She's wondering how aligned are Math Common Core with NAEP math assessments? And I know there's been a lot of recent coverage, and this is a big topic with the report coming out this week. And Chris, I wondered if you could speak to that for us. And Peggy, I of course want your input on this question as well.
Great, yeah, so I'll let Peggy speak about the study that came out on Monday. I think it's something for us to look at as a country. The changes that have come into place with the way mathematics is being taught. We worked very hard with the Common Core standards to make sure that that we weren't giving teachers so much to teach in one grade. So there were some things that moved around. But even in states where they're not using the Common Core standards, we have seen some changes in the scores. So I think it's really important for us to take a look at the nation as a whole, not just the states that are using Common Core, and take a look at that alignment and make sure that whatever's being taught in 4th and 8th grades across the country is close to what NAEP is. And I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but we have to have that conversation and hope to do that in the coming months with the NAGB board. In terms of the technicalities of the study, I'd be happy for Peggy to address those.
So NAEP has a hallmark of a framework that is sort of the union of all curriculums, or the union of all of what people say students should be learning. So we pride ourselves on being sort of curriculum free, if you will. So I guess at one level I wasn't totally surprised that there was some areas of disconnect or a lack of congruence across this study that was performed by NVS and NAEP. Technically speaking, there was a tremendous amount of overlap when you compare what is on the NAEP assessment in terms of the items to what is recommended by Common Core standards. I think at the 4th grade, it was something like 79%, almost 80%. And at the 8th grade, it was in the area of 87%. So that is a lot. So that means that there's a tremendous amount of overlap. Now, the study factually found empirically that there are some areas that the assessment and the framework are not exactly aligned. And I think the content is there, but it's been pushed a little further down the line in terms of grade. So I think the board and others, we're committed to look at that to see what that actually might mean. I should also say that the study found there were some content areas, some strands in the Common Core framework that were not represented by items on the NAEP assessment, but quite honestly, I wasn't really surprised by that either, because that's not unusual. And the way assessments are developed, they're not always indicative of every content strand in a framework. So I think there's some work to do, some deeper digging into the study. It's a second in a series. I think that we're going to be looking closer at item-to-item alignment, or NVS will. They are sort of independent, and see where that takes us. So it's a little bit more work to do.
The only thing I'd add is DC is all in on higher standards, and they've seen great growth. So I think it's not conclusive that this misalignment thing is what's going on here. So I think the bigger thing that I would look at is where people are in their phase of helping teachers get ready to teach these standards, and sort of making sure that we are helping teachers get new materials, be prepared to teach mathematics in this way. I think that is something that states need to look at, and we'll be helping them do that.
I would add, Chris, that's a very good point. I would add that the study found 100% alignment in many areas, and we saw some declines in those areas too. So that means that it's not an alignment issue. You're right, there's a multifaceted approach that I think we have to take.
And I do want to underscore that NAEP has also been called the common yardstick to measure educational progress. To be a common yardstick, as Peggy said, it's free of any particular curriculum, but represents more a consensus framework that is periodically reviewed and updated, say perhaps by analogy like the S&P or something, where individual companies or stocks may move in and out of that over time. But it's really important to have this long-term comparability to be able to measure across states, across curricula and frameworks and districts. And that's our charge by Congress to do that. And the results in a case like this, the researcher Michael Fullen, talks about the notion of an implementation dip when people are trying new things, learning new skills and progress. And so the extent of change that our schools have been experiencing over the last several years, I think clearly there's an opportunity for districts themselves, for states, to understand what's happening locally that may be a factor here. We have another question.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Gabe Katzman with Capital News Service. How are you guys doing? 2 days ago, President Barack Obama said he wanted to fix the problem with standardized testing. And I just want to know your thoughts on the president's idea of significantly reducing standardized testing. Thanks. And I'm going to go back to my camera.
I'm assuming, Peggy, you don't want to comment on that.
No, I don't.
Okay, yeah, all right, I won't.
But I will
I guess
make-
I get to comment on it.
Yeah,
So, okay. So, you know, I think we're, as states, we agree with the president that we need to look at how much testing is going on across the country. We've been working for about a year now as we've implemented these standards. We have 39 states that have worked in some formal way to reduce testing already. So the president calling for this in many ways is an extension of what states are already doing to reduce the amount of testing that's going on. I think the other part of this is to look at the test prep culture across our schools and sort of making sure that we're not just doing everything in preparation for that end of year test. And we've got to work to say that great teaching is great test prep, and that's something that I think our states are really behind. So while it's great to see the president caring about how much testing is going on across the country, I think the bottom line is this conversation is going to happen at state agencies and districts across the country to make sure that we have the right amount of testing. One of our members, the North Carolina superintendent, on Monday said she has the Goldilocks test, not too hot, not too cold when it comes to testing. So she wants just the right amount of testing going on across the country. And we'll work to do that, and I think it's something that we can be focused on as state superintendents.
And I'll also point out that NAEP is a very efficient design of testing. It's a sample. It's not every student. And every student does not take the entire battery of the assessments. They take a portion of that, and then by virtue of having the larger samples, you're able to draw these types of very robust conclusions. And that design is something dependent upon the type of questions that are sought to be answered through testing serves us well, and again, nationally, a very efficient model for how to conduct large-scale assessments. Okay. Do we have another question from our webcast audience?
We do, Terry. Thank you so much. I'd like to stay on the topic of the states that Peggy just released, the state findings. And we have a question from our webcast audience. Is there anything the majority of states can learn from the states that have showed improvement this year? And I wondered, Chris, maybe you could speak generally, and Hansel, if you could speak about DC.
Yeah, I mean, I think, actually, I think what we saw in DC will be really interesting to see if Hansel has some reflections on that. I think the first thing is that the states that, Mississippi and West Virginia that I highlighted earlier, both of them have really doubled down on helping teachers get ready to teach their standards. So I keep coming back to this, but teachers need to feel supported as we go into this conversation, that they need to feel like they're not just given a set of standards and turned to and said, good luck, have at it. And so I think the states that are seeing the growth are really in an implementation arc where they're more towards the end of this, so more towards teachers being ready to teach these standards. And so I think as I've said in my earlier comments, there's just a lot of change going on in education. So what I'm hoping we'll see is in the coming 2 years, teachers will get more comfortable with their higher standards, and we will have these new assessments in place from the state level. And I think that will lead to a more stable environment so that teachers will feel comfortable teaching to these higher standards. So that's what I'm hoping will take place. And I think that's what we see in some of the states that have made gains.
I would echo Chris's comments about the importance of the implementation of the standards, not just the standards themselves. And I think here in DC, DCPS has done an incredible amount of work in preparing their educators and supporting them with aligned curriculum materials. Our public charter schools are also taking really important strides and have innovative efforts going on in this area. Our current Deputy Mayor for Education, Jenny Niles, when she was the head of E.L. Haynes, one of our city's public charter schools, led an important Race to the Top project around Common Core professional development for both DCPS and public charter school teachers. And those kinds of efforts over the last few years, I think, have been really key to DC's growth. I think the other thing I would point to in DC is just really sustained leadership and focus on education over a number of years. Although I'm new to my role, I think the city has really benefited from the continuity and strength of leadership across the board and the focus on education.
Any more questions from those of you in attendance today? Let's take another web question and see how long this takes us till we have to conclude.
Thanks, Terry. I think this might be the last one we have time for today until we move on. A webcast attendee is wondering, does it make sense to expect students to improve every year? Is learning an incremental process that kids will continually do better every year? Or could one expect to have ups and downs in performance?
I think it makes sense to expect kids to improve every year. And I think that's something that we should have as a goal. That doesn't mean we should all drop our heads and say, the results weren't what we wanted this year across the country. We should take this as a call to continue to double down on helping people understand what it means to be ready for life after they leave high school. I think this change across the country is understated for us. It's a big deal that we're starting to ask kids to be ready to either go into college or go into a job training program or go into the military. That's a shift, a huge shift in this country from when we were in high school. And I think that change in itself and that change in expectations is so important to highlight. And so for me, I think I'm all for asking kids to improve every year. I think we should see these scores go up every time we do it. It didn't happen this time across the country. But the biggest thing is we've got to redouble our efforts and get to work. This is good work, and we see places where it is working, so we know we can do it. So that's how I would respond to that.
Hansel or Peggy, do you either want to add to that?
Just say that I think I agree with Chris that I think we all believe in the importance of continuous improvement, to continue to reflect on our work and seek to do better every single day, every single week, every single year. And so I think we can expect that from our students because we expect it of ourselves in supporting them in their learning.
Okay. I think the challenge facing us today in our education is that we're not only raising the bar for our students and our schools, but we're asking to accelerate the rate of improvement at the same time, and in many cases with fewer resources, in being very conscious of the disparities that do exist there around socioeconomic lines, around race and gender, and how do we close those gaps. So regardless of the particular one test results here, as Chris has said several times this morning, that there's still a lot of work for us to move forward. And I think that collectively we have the opportunity to continue to make progress. As this will conclude our first session focused on the state results. We're going to do a reset and then move on to the district level, the tutor results. During this transition, we have a brief video presentation which will introduce NAEP and show the resources of NAEP and how these results provide a vital resource that are helping educators across the country, helping parents across the country to improve the United States student achievement. Thank you all for being here for the first part of our session.
To get student achievement in our nation where we want it to be, we first need to know where we stand. Tests are an important way to learn how our students are doing. But how do we get from test results to meaningful improvements in our students' education? NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, is our premier source of information on U.S. student achievement over time. Parents, teachers, and policymakers across the country can use the information NAEP provides as a powerful resource to help improve student learning. NAEP is also known as the nation's report card. It provides rich data on student performance in reading and math every 2 years, as well as a wide variety of other subjects every few years. NAEP uses achievement levels to provide meaningful descriptions of what students should know and be able to do in each subject. While NAEP doesn't report on individual students or schools, it provides data for the nation as a whole, for every state, and for more than 20 urban school districts. NAEP can also be linked to international assessments in math, science, and reading, allowing states to compare their performance with that of countries around the world. NAEP allows us to address gaps in achievement between different groups of students. And with each assessment, NAEP captures rich data on factors including how often students talk about their studies at home, how often they work together on class projects, or how many pages they're asked to read for homework. Understanding these factors can help parents and teachers create environments that promote better learning. NAEP data also contribute to unique studies, including a report that looks at reading and math achievement over more than 40 years, and a study of how NAEP scores relate to the rigor of the courses high school students take. And NAEP can now be used to tell, for the first time ever, what proportion of 12th graders have the academic skills they need to enter college. NAEP has embarked on the first large-scale assessment of technology and engineering literacy and has examined whether 4th graders are ready to write using computers, blazing a path for the future of assessment technology. By 2017, all NAEP subjects will be assessed using computers. The nation's report card is our best source of data on where we stand in education, but it's about more than just numbers. NAEP provides our country the tools to help improve educational practices to get all students where we want them to be.
Welcome back. It feels like just a few minutes ago that we were together here. Now we turn our attention to the district level results. We are joined by Michael Casserly, Executive Director of the Council for Great City Schools, as well as Chancellor Henderson. We will begin, similar to with the state results, with Peggy Carr providing a presentation on the NAEP Trial Urban District Assessment. Pleased to welcome back up Peggy Carr.
So let's resume. And we'll start with results for 21 large urban school districts. And of course, we've collected this data through the Trial Urban District Assessment. And again, we refer to it as TUDA. I'll be describing the results from that assessment now. The TUDA program started with 2002 assessment. The Council of Great City Schools has been a prime mover behind getting the program started and expanded. And this has been in collaboration with NCES and the governing board. Participation in the program by school districts is voluntary. Participating districts must fulfill certain criteria for inclusion in the program, such as population size, 250,000 or more, and having enough students to provide sufficient sample for assessments in 3 subjects at one time. In addition, at least half of the students must be non-white, and half must be eligible for the National School Lunch Program. We'll probably revisit that at some point. The numbers of students included and districts included in the assessment, of course, depends on funding. Participation in the NAEP program affords the urban districts the opportunity for their educational performance to be measured on a common yardstick with other districts. The large city students in general, the states that they are located in, and of course the nation. We compare the performance of tutor districts to public school students in the nation and the large cities. Now, large cities are a peer group for the comparison here because they are very similar in population size and demographic makeup with the tutor districts. This map shows the urban school districts that participated in 2003, and it includes 6 original tutor participants from 2002. In 2015, the number was expanded. It now includes 21. Duval County was added in 2015, and therefore today we're not going to talk about any trend data for them. We don't have trend data for them just yet. I want to go over some of our 2015 findings from the tutor results before I go into detail today about these results. Unlike the national and state results, there wasn't a strong pattern in any given subject or grade, and the results did vary. As I mentioned in the first half of my presentation today, the city variable as well as the large city variable was not significantly different from 2013 across the grade subject combinations. However, there were score gains in 6 of the 20 tutor districts compared to 2013, and 10 of the 20 districts did have losses in 1 or more subjects in comparison to 2013. Over the long term, there are some tutor districts that are outpacing the nation in score gains. Several districts, in fact 7 districts, have greater score gains than the nation in 1 or more subjects and grade combinations in comparison to 2003. There are some bright spots too in certain districts, and we'll share that with you in just a bit. Here are some overall summary of changes in average scores from 2013 for the tutor districts across the grade subject combinations. In 2015, 3 districts had overall score gains in more than 1 subject grade. They include Chicago, DCPS, DC Public Schools, and Miami-Dade. There were 3 districts that saw significant decreases in overall average scale scores and in more than 1 grade or subject. They include Albuquerque, Baltimore, Hillsborough County, I should say. 5 districts had no changes in overall performance, average performance scores in either grade or subject, and so they're not shown here in this chart. So let's start with the math data for tutor. As mentioned previously, the tutor districts are a subset of large districts, those with a population of 250,000 or more. It is useful to first show how students in large cities compare to the nation's public school students. At grade 4, we see the scores for large cities are unchanged from 2013. While the nation showed a significant decrease. Over time, there have been greater gains for large city schools compared to the nation. Now, we can see here from the pattern that this increase for the large city has really helped to narrow the gap between the nation and the large cities since 2003. As you can see on the bottom left, the gap between the nation and the large city in 2003 was 10 points. And in 2015, that gap has narrowed to 6 points. This chart shows the gains over time in comparison to 2003 or 2003, which was the first year of 10 urban districts, and they took the assessment in both mathematics and the reading assessment. The chart starts by showing a comparison, I should say, to the gains made by large cities to those in the nation, as indicated by the bars here. The asterisks indicate that the gains of the large cities are larger than the nation by a statistically significant margin. We now see the 5 districts that had increases that outpaced the nation. They are the District of Columbia, Chicago, Boston, Atlanta, and Houston. The other 5 districts have increases that are not similar, that are very similar to the nation, I should say, and the double asterisk on the New York City and Cleveland indicate that their gains are less than the large city average by statistically a significant amount. Now let's look at the achievement levels for large cities, and you can see that they have changed in comparison to the nation. At the top of the slide, you have the national public, and at the bottom of the slide, you have the large city 4th grade mathematics. In large cities at grade 4, the percentages of students at all achievement levels in 2015 were not different from those in 2013. Across the nation, the percentage of students at proficient decreased by 2 percentage points, and the percentage that were below basic rose by 1 percentage point. Looking back to 2003, both large cities and the nation had statistically significant changes across the several achievement levels. Large cities reported increases in percentages of students at advanced and proficient, while there was a reduction of those below basic, which is what you want to see. The percentage of students rated as basic was statistically unchanged. The national results had increases in students' performance at advanced and proficient and decreases in the percentage of students at basic and below basic. On this next slide, to the far left, you see the urban districts had a significant increase from 2013. In the middle column, you'll see the jurisdictions that had no change, while on the far right, you'll see the urban districts that had a significant decrease. In mathematics, average scores were higher in 2015 than in 2013 in 3 districts: Dallas, the District of Columbia, and Miami-Dade. The increase in score points is shown next to each of the arrows, the up arrows that you see here. So 10 districts in the large cities showed no change in comparison to 2013, and 7 districts, as indicated here, had a significant decrease along with the nation. I also want to describe the legend in the chart here. The cities listed in bold are the ones that scored higher than large city average for grade 4 mathematics. The ones in italicized print are lower than the large city average. And if the city is neither bold or italicized, that means their 2015 score is no different than the large city score. On this slide, I show the change in performance, if any, by race ethnicity, and for the 10 districts that experienced change in overall performance when you compare 13 to 15. If a particular urban district is not on this slide, this means they did not have an overall change or change to any of the race ethnicities mentioned here. The first column shows whether the score went up or down for all students as indicated by the arrows. The remaining columns show whether the specific race ethnicity group increased or decreased for those districts. The dashes indicate change was not reported, was not recorded, and usually this is because the sample of the students was not large enough in a particular category. While large cities showed no change, most of the groups that had changed showed decreases. The only exception were Hispanic students in Miami-Dade, and their scores improved. However, for most groups in most cities, they did not have change in performance. Now we'll take a look at grade 8 mathematics scores. Large city scores were flat. The nation saw a decrease from 2013 to 2015. As we saw in the fourth grade data, large city schools have made greater gains in comparison to the nation since 2003, which has held steady, and it has narrowed the gap that we're now seeing. So that 14-point gap in 2013 is significantly larger than the 8-point gap in 2015 that we're now reporting. Like in grade 4 mathematics, the gains of large cities in grade 8 mathematics are larger than the nation. Atlanta, Chicago, Boston, Los Angeles, San Diego, and the District of Columbia, Houston, all had larger increases than the national average. The increases in the 3 remaining districts or cities are statistically similar to the nation. Now let's turn to grade 8. And the story here is very similar. Across the nation, the percentages of students who were proficient decreased by 2 percentage points, and there were 3 percentage point increases of students below basic. Large cities did not have significant changes in any of the achievement levels. Since 2003, the nation has significant increases in the percentage of students who were proficient and advanced, and correspondingly decreases in the percentages of students at basic and below basic. The achievement level changes in large cities had the exact same pattern since 2003. So now let's take a look at the specific tutors that we've been talking about today. At grade 8 mathematics, one district, Chicago, improved over the 2 years. 6 districts did not change significantly, and Dallas, Hillsborough County, and Houston decreased. As I noted, 4 districts had changes in scores at grade 8, with Chicago improving and others declining. Now, this is reflecting their district's overall performance. White and Hispanic students in Chicago improved, while Hispanic students in Dallas, Hillsborough County, and Houston decreased in performance. Now, let's take a look at reading performance for the urban district and the urban districts and the large cities in general. At grade 4, in 2015, the scores for both the nation and the large city schools were unchanged from 2013. Overall, the large improvement that we're seeing for the large cities has been very significant, and they have been improving and making gains since 2002 compared to the nation, and again, closing the gap in performance between the two. Looking at the long-term trend for specific urban districts, we see that 5 districts had greater gains than the nation at grade 4 reading since 2003. They are District of Columbia, Atlanta, Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles. These other 5 districts that are not shown, that are shown here, they had gains, but they were similar to the nation as a whole. We see our achievement gaps here again in this chart, the nation at the top and the large cities at the bottom. Both the nation and the large cities have had increases in percentages of students at advanced, proficient, and basic. Since 2013, neither the nation nor large cities show significant changes in the percentage of students in the various achievement levels. Now, turning our attention to scores of urban districts in grade 4 reading, we see the scores increase from 2013 in 4 districts. They include Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, and the District of Columbia. In 15 districts, the scores had no change, and Baltimore is the only district where scores decreased since 2013. Note again that there's the bold indication in the italicized comparison as I described before. 5 districts experienced more changes in reading at grade 4 between 2013 and 2015. The only change for race ethnicity in these districts were a decrease for white students in Baltimore City and increases for black students in Boston and the District of Columbia. Grade 8 reading. Large cities had no statistically significant change over the two-year period. Since 2003, both the nation and the large cities have had significant growth, though it's important to note that similar to grade 4, the scores for large cities have risen faster than the nation as a whole. Looking at the long-term gains at grade 8 reading, we see that Los Angeles, Atlanta, San Diego, and Chicago have made greater gains than the nation in grade 8 reading since 2003. At grade 8, this next slide here, the story about achievement levels is slightly different. One thing that is similar is that both the nation and the large cities have increased in the percentage of students scoring at proficient since 2003. The story, however, is different over the past 2 years. Since 2013, the nation had a decrease of students above proficient, while the large cities had no statistically significant changes. At grade 8 reading, Miami-Dade had an increase shown here. 16 districts, noted here in the middle, stayed about the same. In Albuquerque, Baltimore, Hillsborough County, the scores decreased. At grade 8, 3 districts decreased, shown here, and 1 district improved in reading in comparison to 2013. Again, the race ethnicity groups that changed in performance were consistent overall with their district performance. Black and Hispanic students improved in Miami-Dade, as shown here. White and Hispanic students decreased in Albuquerque, as did black students in Baltimore City. And Hispanic students also decreased in Hillsborough County. So this concludes my summary of all of the 2015 results that I wanted to share with you today in reading and mathematics. We have much more information on our website through our interactive report card. Detailed data are easily available through the NAEP Data Explorer, our NDE. And we have released assessment questions that are available through our NAEP questions tool. So I would like to conclude by thanking sincerely the schools and the students that participated in the 2015 assessment for their time and effort. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. I recognize that you and your staff have been working tireless to be able to prepare for this release of the 2015 math and reading results. Take a chairman's privilege of a special shout out to Chicago and their increase over the past decade, and then also definitely want to acknowledge and congratulate our new incoming board member, Superintendent Carvalho, for your amazing results. They're very impressive. It suggests that you've got a lot of very positive things going on in Miami-Dade. Congratulations. The big story behind all of this is the narrowing of the gap between our urban districts and our state and national averages. It's an important story that I think will continue to unfold over time, and something worth watching closely. There's no better person to talk about this than Michael Casserly, who in his role as Executive Director for the Council of Great City Schools has for several decades now helped to unify urban school districts in their approach to improving student achievement, developing a strong vision for that. He has done a number of very important things. Most notably, from my point of view, was he was the driving force behind the establishment of the TUDA district program that provides these very meaningful results that district leaders, teachers, parents, and community members can get their hands around. It's not as big as a state, but it's very much clearly aligned with what is happening on the ground in our nation's urban centers and large cities. And the person who's responsible more than any for that is Michael Casserly. Welcome him to the podium to provide his perspective.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Casserly. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools, and I want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you for your interest in these important results. Before I start, I want to thank Terry Mazzani and Bill Bouchard and their great team at the National Assessment Governing Board, and I want to thank Peggy Carr and her terrific group at the National Center for Education Statistics. We really owe you a debt of gratitude for your dedication and your expertise and all of the long hours that you put into making this such a high impact and high integrity report. So thank you so much. These 2015 results mark the 12th year since we received our first round of both reading and math scores in 2003 as cities. Since that initial TUDA assessment, we've been through a lot in public education, but one of the constants is the marked improvement in urban student achievement. Slowly but surely, we are catching the nation. Between 2003 and 2015, large city schools have narrowed the gap with the nation in fourth grade reading by a third. In eighth grade reading, we have narrowed this gap with the nation by 46%. In fourth grade math, we have narrowed the gap with the nation by 40%. And in eighth grade math, we have narrowed the gap between the large city school districts and the nation by 43%. In all, nearly 100,000 more of our large city fourth graders scored at or above the proficient level in math in 2015 than 12 years ago. And nearly 50,000 more of our fourth graders scored at or above the proficient level in reading. Our progress as urban public schools has been substantial and important for the nation. And this year, we largely held our own against a headwind as the nation and many states saw significant declines in reading and math performance. More notable, however, are the critical gains that many of our cities made during this critical period of educational reform and transition. The District of Columbia Public Schools posted eye-popping gains in fourth grade reading and math, cementing their standing as the nation's fastest improving urban school system. They have now posted a whopping 17 scale score points worth of improvement in reading since 2007 and an historic 18-point gain in fourth grade math, surpassing 11 other cities over that period. And their gains just since 2003 amongst African American and Hispanic students is now in the 10 to 12 scale score point range. In addition, the Miami-Dade County Public Schools scored very muscular and across-the-board gains in all 4 subjects and grades. They are only one of 3 districts to post at least nominal gains in all 4 grade subject combinations, and they now exceed the national average in 4th grade reading by a significant margin. Their sustained reforms and their early childhood initiatives are bearing fruit in ways that show why they were winners of the Broad Prize for Excellence in Urban Education a couple of years ago, and I suspect that their superintendent, Alberto Carvalho, during the discussion period may have a word or two to say about this. Cleveland also produced substantial across-the-board improvements in reading and math, demonstrating that the work that they are doing under their Cleveland plan is producing substantial academic benefits for the students of that great city. Chicago also demonstrated gains in all grades and subjects, underscoring the work that they have done to implement higher standards and to lengthen their school day. And look at Boston. They have done something truly remarkable here. They have not only caught up to the national average in 8th grade math after having been significantly below it in 2003, but they have now also caught up to the national average in 4th grade reading, the only district to have caught the national average in 2 subjects and grades after having been significantly below, and also having a student population that is significantly higher in English language learners and students below the poverty line. You may also have noticed that the Austin and Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools remain at or above the national average over the course of this testing, and they are now joined by the Jacksonville schools. We know that we still have a long way to go to ensure a world-class education for all of our urban kids in all of our cities. But our urban schools have devoted substantial energy over the last dozen years or so to improving the quality of their instructional program and the rigor of their standards. To be sure, we will also be looking at why some of our cities saw decreases in their NAEP scores, but speculation as to why at this early point is a little bit of a fool's errand. No doubt somebody will ask me to act the fool, but at this point, speculation as to exactly why some of those decreases happened is a little early. I would encourage the NAGB board, however, to have a serious conversation about how NAEP and the Common Core can be brought into tighter alignment, or at least how the analysis of the NAEP results can adjust for any misalignment that there might be. Remember that 15 years ago, when we first started as urban public school systems in our participation in NAEP, we did so for 3 reasons. One, we as urban school systems wanted to demonstrate that we were fully committed to the highest academic standards for our kids, and we backed it up with our strong support for the Common Core. 2, we wanted to be able to compare ourselves with those that share many of the same challenges as us in urban schools. And 3, we wanted a way to gauge our progress and to evaluate our reforms in ways that the current 50-state assessment system did not allow. In general, we are encouraged by the progress that so many of our cities have made when many of their states have moved in the opposite direction. But we are not satisfied. We know we need to accelerate. We know that our racial, language, and economic achievement gaps are still too wide. But these NAEP data give us the tools that we need to ask hard questions about our instructional practices and where we need to improve. And the results are giving us even greater confidence that urban education in this country can be substantially improved. And that's the point behind all of these numbers. It's why we volunteered for this program in the first place. So we could tell what was working and what wasn't. So we could raise the quality of public education in our great cities. We have a long way to go, but we did not get into this work to see our schools simply reflect, much less to perpetuate, the inequities that too many of our kids face. We got into this work in urban education to extinguish those inequities and to replace them with unfettered opportunity. I am very proud of the work that our cities have done over these years, and I am profoundly optimistic about what the future holds for us. Thank you, and during the discussion period, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And now it's my honor to present to you the great Chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools, Kaya Anderson. Kaya.
Alberto, I think you and I should get up on the couch and start jumping up and down, right? It is a great day in DC Public Schools today, friends. I am incredibly proud of the growth that we've seen, but I need you to understand that it's the proverbial village that is responsible for this growth. Earlier today, Chairman David Grasso, who is the chair of the Education Committee of the City Council, was here to share in our celebration. The chairman of our City Council, of our entire City Council, Phil Mendelson, will be here shortly to share. My mayor, Muriel Bowser, sends her regrets that she can't be here today, but she's been critical. You already met Liz Davis, who is the president of the Washington Teachers Union. But I want you to really see who's responsible for the growth that happened in DC over these last few years. Does anybody know what month October is? It's Principal Appreciation Month. These are the leaders who are making it happen with our talented teams of educators every single day in the district. These are the people who are responsible for the lovely slides. Did you see the slides that went like this? This said District of Columbia. These are those people, and we have a number of them here today. And I just want them to stand so we can recognize the people on the ground who are really doing this work. Can my principals please stand? Thank you. As I said, I'm very proud of this year's growth. The growth that we saw, especially in the 4th grade on the TUDA this year, was shared by students across the district, including our low-income students and our Black students who actually outpaced district-wide improvement. That's something that's very important for us. I'm also proud that we've seen growth over the past 4 years. So this week, I proudly celebrate my 5-year anniversary as Chancellor of DC Public Schools. And so, thank you. And so I own our scores from 2011 through 2015. And I'm excited that we have seen consistent growth over these years. Since 2011, DCPS has seen the greatest growth of any urban district in 4th grade reading and in 4th grade math and in 8th grade reading. And I think that's something to be proud of. We've also embarked in 2007 on an ambitious new approach to education reform. We became an agency under mayoral control. We have pursued ambitious, aggressive, urgent strategies since 2007. And likewise, since 2007, we've seen the greatest growth of any urban district in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. In 2007, when we started this work, we were a bottom performing district on the TUDA. And now we've actually become we're the top half. We're now in the top half of participating districts now in 2015. And don't get me wrong, I am thrilled, not about where we are, because we have a long way to go to get our young people to where we want them to be. But that amazing poet Drake said, we started from the bottom, now we're here. Now, there are a lot of people who will ask us how we made these gains. In fact, if you follow me on Twitter, there are a lot of people who are telling us how we made our gains, right? Some people attribute the gains to my friends in the charter sector. But I want you to be clear, these are not charter school gains. These are DCPS gains, right? And our gains equaled or exceeded the charters in every grade level and subject this year. Some people attribute the changes to gains in demographics, changes in demographics. But our low-income students and our African-American students actually also posted impressive gains. There are some people who say, well, the economy has changed, and that's a good thing, especially in DC, or we have good weather most days, or 100 other factors. But I submit to you that our gains belong to the good old-fashioned hard work that our teachers, our school staff, our school leaders, and our central office people have done. Nobody wants to give us the credit, but I'm going to take the credit this morning because these people are working incredibly hard to change everything that we do to ensure that our young people have better outcomes, and we're seeing the results. We've made tremendous investments in curriculum. We created a curriculum because when I got here, we didn't have one. And we aligned it to the Common Core standards. We raised expectations for students. We focus on equity of academic rigor through our Cornerstones projects. And those things are paying off. We've had a tremendous focus on engaging parents and families because we know that we are DCPS and we can do this, but we can't do it by ourselves. And our students move more significantly when their families are involved. And so in partnership with the local foundation, the Flamboyant Foundation, we're training our teachers and our school staff to go out and do home visits and to engage parents as partners in helping their students. We have made tremendous investments in human capital, ensuring that we have the very best teachers and very best school leaders and very best school staff, and not only that we get them, but that we retain them, that we promote them, that we reward them, that they stay. And we've now become a magnet for educators in the country, in part because we have the highest first-year teacher salary, but really because DCPS is the hotness, and people want to come be down with the work that we're doing. We also have seen tremendous benefits from extending learning time. Like Chicago, we have a number of schools where we have a longer school day. For the first time this year, we're piloting a longer school year. And at those schools, we see increased gains for our young people. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. As I said, we still have a long way to go. But for a long time, we just weren't moving. And it's important for us to celebrate the movement, celebrate progress, while we remind our teachers and our school leaders and our family members that if we can move this far in 8 years, just think about where we can go over the next 8 years. I want to thank my friend Mike Casserly and his amazing team at the Council for Great City Schools, because without them, we wouldn't even have this TUTA data. And Mike noted in his remarks that DCPS has sealed its standing as the nation's fastest improving school district with these new scores. This proves that we're not a one-hit wonder. We are a trend, and we're going to continue trending because it means that there's real and significant improvement happening in our schools. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you both. We did want to schedule this so that we've got the really amazing good news story here that we hope does put into context the amount of hard work and effort that is represented in these gains here. We're now going to move to an opportunity for question and answer, and I also want to afford an opportunity for Superintendent Carvalho if you would wish to make some remarks as well, because I know some of the questions will be, what have you done, what has made a difference there, and if you feel at any point that you'd like to come up and address those, I welcome that as well. So we can start with questions, but if you want to come up at any time, please feel free to.
Well, good morning, everyone. Congratulations, Kaya. Congratulations to the districts that have, in fact, moved the needle of student achievement across the country, recognizing that as a whole, there are some downward trends, but certainly it is critical for us to look at the best practices that some districts in some areas in reading and mathematics have in fact demonstrated, regardless of that national trend. I stand as the proud superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Mike is right. We were the Broad winning district, and we have been able to not only improve but sustain, but actually improve our performance over time. And a lot of the questions center around how is that done? Well, this is no longer a magic trick. In fact, it is no longer even an issue of a skill deficit. It's in fact a will set proposition. I think we all know, if you ask Kaya, if you ask superintendents across America, we know what actually moves student achievement. The question for districts in the country is there sufficient will, political courage to do the right thing, notwithstanding the opposing winds that often counter effective school reform? And the answer is simple. Leadership matters. Effective leaders absolutely make a difference. In Miami-Dade, and this is not necessarily a proud conversation, but was a necessary conversation. Over the past few years, we changed 75% of all principals. Leadership matters. Now schools in Miami-Dade are led by instructional leaders who are data-driven, who understand communities, understand teacher effectiveness, understand what supporting a teacher in a classroom is like. Secondly, teacher effectiveness matters. I don't debate the issue of qualifications because the research is compelling about qualification. Teacher effectiveness matters. And we have made a collective effort in working with organized labor in Miami-Dade to incentivize teachers to go to the most fragile schools and make a difference there. We've done it through the negotiating process. Next thing, I believe, is an early investment in early childhood education. How do you dramatically increase graduation rates? And in Miami-Dade, we turned schools with graduation rates at 36% to 80 and 90%. How do you actually increase graduation rates? The most efficient and effective way is by investing aggressively in early childhood education. Get it right from pre-kindergarten, kindergarten through second and third grade, and trust me, your middle scores will look like Miami-Dade, where we were significant outliers. And lastly, in this hyper-connected society that we live in, digital convergence, particularly allowing children who are restricted to learning in between bells in school, empowering them with access to digital content that allows for remediation and acceleration beyond the classroom. That is why we engage in a digital convergence platform in our district, eliminating the digital deserts and continuing education beyond the last bell. And the last point, and I think this is critical, particularly for the cohort of districts that Michael Casserly leads. Stability of leadership. Harmonious relationship between the political body, school boards, as we have in Miami-Dade, and administration. 2-year stint of leadership in large urban school systems does not allow for sustainable reform efforts and results. And unfortunately, that is about the average for large urban superintendent tenure. So thank you very much to this fantastic board that, as of tomorrow, I believe, I will be joining. Thank you very much for the research that's been done. And by the way, I had no influence over the stellar performance of Miami-Dade. Thank you very much back home. I know folks are following. To my freedom fighters of our generation, our remarkable teachers, our leaders, our board, our parents, and our students. For those who believe that somehow America has lost its way, we are the nation of innovation. And rather than somehow becoming a second-rate imitation of anybody else across the world, we ought to have the strength to reinvent ourselves into a better version of us. And it begins in American cities. Thank you very much.
Alberto? Thank you so much for providing such an in-depth perspective on what it takes to get this type of result. Now, question and answers. For those of you in the auditorium here, if you'd come to the microphone. And I'm sure that we also have some questions via the webcast audience. Yes, ma'am, please, your name and wait.
This is for the representatives of NAEP, of not sharing individual student scores or school scores so that we could all engage in the hypothesizing about what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, there are a lot of different reasons for that, including that no one student takes the entire test, so that those scores are not reflective of any student. But it's really baked into the design, and I'll ask Peggy to comment on all of that. It's an important question that the public needs to know the answer to.
Actually, your description earlier in the first segment was pretty spot on, accurate. Students only take about a fourth of the assessment, so it's a collective group estimate that we have. We don't have reliable scores for individual students. And actually, the assessment is so large, when we spiral all of the books together and put them in the schools, not all of them are in any given school for the most part. So there's not reliable data at the school level, there's not reliable data at the student level or the school level to report on, even if we wanted to. We are a group level assessment, not an individual level assessment. And as hinted to by the chairman, it's by design. When the assessment was first authorized by Congress, they wanted it that way. And we are also prohibited by law in providing individual scores to students. We protect the confidentiality.
Yeah, I do want to highlight the web resources, though, because test questions are made available. You can do practice assessments yourself, a number of tools so that you are able to gauge. If you're a teacher, for instance, you can compare the rigor of your instruction and your assessment to the types of questions that are asked on the NAEP. And so in that way, it can become a meaningful tool.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Let's go over and ask somebody from the webcast for a question.
Thank you, Terry. A question that we have from someone with the community college, an assistant professor there. They're asking a question that I think it's on a lot of the minds of our webcast audience from a teaching perspective. And they're wondering, what are the important aspects that I can incorporate into my teaching from today's results? And one area that I always find very valuable in NAEP are contextual variables. I wondered, Peggy, if you wanted to mention those, talk about those, and then broaden to the group to talk about any actions that teachers can take as a result of today.
Well, certainly the background questions or contextual questions, as we now refer to them, are sort of a hidden treasure for the program. We have background questions or contextual questions administered to students, to teachers, and to school administrators. And it's just a wealth of data there that should be and could be mined by anyone that has the will to get on the easy, access-driven NAEP Data Explorer that I referred to earlier and sort of generate hypotheses. Now, certainly NAEP is not designed to answer cause and effect, and we're very, very cautious about saying that and reiterating it any time that we can. But certainly these data can be used to generate a hypothesis for anyone who's interested in sort of seeing what the associations are.
Sure. I mean, I'll say I think that the question sort of indicates the kind of test mania that we're experiencing right now, right? What's on the test? What should I be teaching to, right? The NAEP is not that kind of a test. The NAEP is more of a dipstick that jumps into any classroom, any school, anywhere, and says what's going on. So teachers should be focusing on good teaching. And if you're a Common Core state or if you're a state who has chosen your own set of standards, teach like heck to those standards. And I think that's the best way to ensure that, or that's the way we have been moving our needle on the NAEP.
I have to say, as we move in and out of classrooms in our city school districts, we are impressed as we see teachers teaching at a higher level of instruction when teachers are challenging their students, getting them to read more complex material, getting them to think through what it is that they have read and be able to answer questions on that material and compare material in reading passages one to another, being able to explain the answers that they give to a math problem, be able to create formulas for particular math challenges they face and the like. There's lots of different instructional ways in which teachers can address the rigor and the challenges that the NAEP and other similar assessments actually provide. And there is now a wealth of material that is emerging in many of our urban school districts that are beginning to put in the hands of teachers much better information about how to teach at a increasingly high level and to challenge our students to attain ever higher expectations.
Can I make a quick comment on your mic? I'd just like to, since the question was asked by, I believe, a community college professor, that it certainly would be very prudent at this point in America for higher ed, particularly colleges that prepare and engage in teacher preparation formation of the professionals at some point will be hired in schools, to look at where the gaps are nationally and use this information to actually improve, inform teacher preparation formation. We don't often do that. Secondly, to echo what Kaya said, this has been an interesting week. You know, there's a conversation regarding over-testing at the beginning of the week, release of NAEP data midweek, and somewhere between that time, I think the nation is asking what is too much, and hopefully at some point we don't just speak about the quantitative nature of testing, but actually embrace the qualitative examination, what fewer, better assessments actually constitute that provide the greatest revelation and direct information that improves teaching and learning in the classroom. NAEP is a fantastic instrument that provides overall national performance and actually allows us to comparatively see where we are vis-a-vis other large school systems across America and the nation as a whole. We hope the states actually are as deliberate in their state policies in continuing to embrace and analyzing the portfolio of assessments and moving toward better, fewer tests that provide more compelling information regarding student achievement.
I welcome audience members to come up to the microphone. Not seeing anybody right now. I do have a question. Oh, here's one. Terrific.
Hi, Michael Chandler with the Washington Post again. I'm wondering what trends you're seeing with Hispanic students, both in the in DCPS and also other urban districts, recent years and a little bit longer term.
Wonderful question.
In the district, our N size is too small, so we haven't seen the data on our Hispanic students.
Yeah, I believe we haven't gone through and analyzed all of the data yet on DC, but I believe Hispanic students in DC are up significantly.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they are in Dade County. What I'm not sure I can answer for you is whether it's across the board, but we're seeing really substantial gains in many of our cities with Hispanic kids.
It's not showing up in the national data this time around, but in 2013 and previous assessments, we've seen a significant improvement in scores for Hispanic students, despite the increase in the proportion of Hispanic students that we are testing. So they're going against the headwinds, but they're still making significant improvements. So that's something that I think has been consistent over the years. I don't think it's showing up now in 2015, but it is a pattern.
So in Miami-Dade, I mean, we are a minority-majority community. 67% of our student population is Hispanic. And proudly, the Hispanic student population actually performs the nation as a whole and outperforms the nation as a whole and outperforms the large cities. And as you saw in the previous slide, 8th grade performance, both for African American and Hispanic students in Miami-Dade soared in a very unique way compared to the rest of the nation. But by and large, in terms of the relative proportion that Hispanics represent in Miami-Dade, the gains in Miami-Dade are proportionately driven by Hispanic students.
That's true.
Thank you. So one more question from our web audience.
So Terry, earlier today in your comments, you mentioned change as a topic. And from our webcast audience, they are wondering, how do you see NAEP changing and evolving over the next several years? And Peggy, I'd really like your insight on this as well.
Yeah, Peggy, I'll let you start because you've provided leadership for the future of NAEP, and then I'll build on that.
Well, we're making one of the biggest changes, that milestones we've had in the program, in the history of the program, starting in 2017. We are transitioning to a digital-based assessment format from paper and pencil, and that is a big change for us. We're trying to keep pace with the technology, the student learning, what's happening at the homes, and how technology has been integrated into learning sciences and just everyday life. Technology literacy is very key. And so to keep pace, one of the major changes that we're making is transitioning to reading and math 4th grade DBA technology-based assessment starting in 2017. And it's been an interesting journey because we had to start this years ago to get ready for 2017. We're going to continue to make these sort of changes for other content areas, so it would be followed by science in 2019, and then on with the social studies, U.S. history, civics, and geography. So I would say that sort of showcases the biggest landmark that we are looking forward to moving forward for the program.
Yeah, we add to that, continuing to look at the types of frameworks and assessments provided, the recent introduction of the technology, engineering, literacy exam as an example of making sure that we are relevant and contemporary to what young people are learning and need to be learning to be effective citizens and to have good careers and college aspirations. And then the recent controversies around testing have also brought to the forefront the need for assessment literacy and more people understanding the distinctions. How is NAEP different than a formative assessment than one of the standardized assessments that are given there? And so we are providing more and more information in that regard as one of our priorities. To conclude, I would like to hear a little bit, Michael, from you. Based on the release of these results, what does the Council of Great City Schools do? What's on your agenda going forward? How do you support the urban districts as they will be receiving these results, making sense of them? What's your plans there?
The first step that we'll take is to drill down in more depth on the data to see how each of the student groups did in each city, what cities seem to be moving the needle further with which kids, and then looking at some of the instructional reforms and practices that those faster moving cities have pursued, and then make sure that cities that did not see as many improvements as others did, make sure that they have the benefit of the information that we collect from the districts that have made substantial gain. And this is in addition to the tools that we develop, the technical assistance we provide, the meetings that we convene, and the like. One of the things that we try to do is to collect, analyze, and provide the data that all of our cities need in order to push all of us forward. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've been able to make so much progress over the last decade or so. It's because all of the cities are pushing each other. They're competing against each other. They're having fun with their competition. It's in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation that all of us are kind of sharing best practices, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and pushing each other to higher performance.
Okay. Thank you. I want to provide an opportunity for each of our panelists if you have a concluding thought before I wrap up our webinar and session today.
Go us.
Okay. Then,
I'll simply say that I'm proud of the accomplishments of Miami-Dade. I'm proud of the accomplishments of my colleague Kaya in Washington, D.C. And I think one of the conclusions we must arrive at is that America is not going to assess its way to educational excellence. It's going to be great teaching, great learning, with a balanced effort significant to reasonable, respectful testing that actually informs communities of teachers. And to Kaya's earlier comment that it's hot in D.C., it's hot in D.C. public schools. It's hot in Miami all the time, everywhere.
Okay. Thank you. Great comment to end on. I hope that everybody has gained from this discussion of the mathematics and reading report card release, and that you are inspired to want to learn more and continue this conversation. It's going on now on Twitter. Again, you can use the hashtag NAEP for that. I also invite you to visit nationsreportcard.gov to see the full report and examine the data for yourself. Additional materials, including the news release and frameworks guiding the NAEP math and reading assessments, are also available on the governing board's website, nagb.org. And in a few days, an archived version of today's webcast will be available there as well. Members of the media may contact the governing board's public affairs specialist, Stefan Harris, right up here. If you have additional questions, his contact information is on the slide presented here and can be found at nagb.org in the newsroom section. In closing, I want to thank Peggy, Kaya, Chris, and Michael, as well as Alberto, for providing your valuable insights. And of course, I want to thank you all for joining this discussion today. And according to my bell schedule here, we now adjourn to recess.